everyone, welcome back to PSLE Science, and in this video I'll be going through light energy. Okay, so let's take a look at it. Okay, for the first segment of this video, I'm going to go through two key properties of light. Okay, for two key properties of light. So the first property is that light travels in a straight line. Okay. Second property, light can be reflected or absorbed. Okay, so light always travels in a straight line. Okay, so let this yellow color be light. Okay, so it always travels in a straight line. Okay, you see that? Okay, light can be reflected or absorbed. So this is when light is absorbed. So when you're drawing it, right, it must always be in a straight line. And then after that, it won't reflect because it is absorbed by the wood. Okay. Next, light can be reflected. So the light reflects off the glass. Okay. So I hope you understand that. Now let's move on. Okay, for segment 2 of this video, I'll be going through explaining how light enables us to see. Okay, so let's take a look at how light enables us to see. So the object seen is either that the object seen is a light source. Okay, so there's two types. One is that the object seen can be a light source. So the template answer for this, the light from the light source travels into our eyes, enabling us to see the object. Okay, and then for template answer 2, the light from the light source is reflected off the object into our eyes, enabling us to see the object. Okay, the object seen is the light source, or the object is being reflected. Okay, the light from the light source is reflected off the object that we want to see, enabling us to see the object. Okay, but if the object we want to see is the light source, we can see it because the light from the object that we want to see itself is enabling us to see. Okay, so I hope you understand that. Now for the third segment of this video, I'm going to go through a question, and this will help you understand. Okay, so this question is basically how does wearing a reflective vest reduce the chances of a cyclist getting into an accident on the road? So this cyclist over here is wearing a reflective vest. Sorry. Okay, he is wearing a reflective vest. And how does this reduce the chances of the cyclist getting into an accident on the road? Okay. Okay, so this over here, these lines over here are basically the light from the headlight. Okay, so first we need to apply template answer 2, and we need to apply some comparison terms. Okay, because they've used the word reduce over here. Actually, the reflective vest allows light to be reflected off of it. Okay, so more light from the headlamp of the car will be reflected off the reflective surface of the jacket into the driver's eyes. Okay, so this reflective vest, right, enabling the driver to see the cyclist more clearly. If without the reflective vest, right, the driver cannot see the cyclist because the cyclist's clothes might actually just absorb the light, so he can't see the cyclist. But with the reflective vest on, he can actually see, because the light is reflected off him into the driver's eyes. Okay, so imagine there's a driver over here. Okay, so the light over here travels to the vest over here. So imagine, okay, so let me just draw over here. So from here it goes to the vest, okay, and then from the vest it goes into the driver's eyes. Okay, so this is how we show it. Okay, now let's move on. Okay, for the fourth segment of this video, I'm going to go through explaining the formation of shadows. Okay, so let's take a look at a template answer to explain this. So there's a shadow template answer. So what we need to say in this template answer is basically, shadows are formed when light from the light source, which travels in a straight line, is blocked by an object which is translucent or opaque. Okay? Okay, do you know what is translucent? So translucent is basically allow some light. Okay? And opaque is allow no light to pass through. Okay, so this is the shadow template answer. So basically a object, so imagine this is the light ray. Okay, so the light over here, and then there's a object over here. Okay, so there's a torchlight over here. Okay, and then this object blocks it, and then the light cannot continue anymore. So this is how shadows are formed. Okay, okay, now let's take a look at three properties of the shadows. Okay, three properties of shadows. Okay, so the three properties of shadows. So there is shape, size, and shade. So let's take a look at shape first. Okay, for shape, there are many possibilities of different shadow shapes to be formed with just one object. For example, we have a mug over here. Okay, so this mug actually can form three types of shadows. One, a rectangle. This is when the handle is placed behind. So basically the light source, imagine, right, the cup over here, but then the handle is over here. Okay, you cannot see through the object, but over here I'm showing a see-through kind of thing, and then the light comes straight at it. So this is how a rectangular shadow can be formed. Okay, next, this type of shadow also can be formed. So basically the object right now, light has been shined on it. That's how this shadow will be formed. Okay, next, this part over here. So this is basically the top view or the bottom view. It could be the top view or the bottom view. Either one of them, you shine the light, it will show this kind of shadow. Okay, and another type also, right, is that it can be formed on any of this, because based on turning the object. Okay, so if you turn it, right, it can be any one of these possibilities. It can be even so close to each other, and it can even go through each other, like here, in between each other. Yeah, so these are so many possibilities of shadows. Okay, not just three, so many possibilities. Okay, so I hope you understand the shape for this section. Now let's move on to size. Okay, for size, we have determining the size of the shadow. So how do we do this? So 1 is based on the distance between the light source and the object, and 2 is based on the distance between the object and the screen. Okay, so there's 3 variables that you can move: the light source, the object, and the screen. So this basically tells us that the variables control 2 things, which is the distance between the light source and the object, and the distance between the object and the screen. Okay, let me teach you a small trick to finding the size of the shadow. So basically, the light comes out from the middle, right? Just put a dot in the middle over here. Okay, so for the size of this object, right, you just need to draw 2 straight lines which just slightly touch the object at this point, and you just drag the line until it reaches the screen. Okay, so here I've dragged the line until it reaches this screen and this screen, and then we can measure the size. Okay, so let's say that this red color over here is the size of the screen over here, and the size of the shadow over here. Okay, so these are the 2 sizes of the shadow. So you just need to draw the line, okay, and it will give you the exact size of the shadow. And then same over here, the smaller one, you just need to draw the line and it gives you the shadow. Okay, so this is how you find it out. And actually in exams, right, they'll ask which creates the bigger shadow, object 1 or object 2. And then in the exams, right, I actually use this trick. So it basically gives us the same thing. So when we use this trick, it will actually give us the size of the shadow, and it is accurate. The size of the shadow, we can see whether it's bigger or smaller. Okay, so I hope you understand this. Now let's move on to the next one, which is shade. So the next one is shade. So determining the shade of the shadow is basically based on the size of the shadow, and larger shadows are lighter and blurrier, and smaller shadows are actually more darker and they are more clearer and more sharper. Okay, so we can say this. Okay, so you yourself can test this out. So if you have a torchlight from your phone, you can actually put it over some just a ball, perhaps a tiny ball, and then you can see when you move it further away and when it creates a bigger shadow, when you move it further away it creates a smaller shadow, right? You can actually see that on the wall it will show a darker, clearer and sharper shadow, and when you put the ball close to the torch and point it at the wall, right, it will actually show a very large ball, but it's actually very light and blurry. Okay, so it won't actually see as such a circlish shape. Okay, so it won't seem so circular. Okay, so next, for shade itself, there's number 2, based on opacity, transparency of the material of the object. Okay, so transparent materials are basically allowing the most light to pass through, and they do not cast a shadow on the screen. Okay, translucent materials, they allow some light to pass through. They can cast a faint shadow on the screen. Okay, opaque materials do not allow any light to pass through. They cast the dark shadow on the screen. Okay, so opaque materials, translucent materials, and transparent materials. So transparent materials are like glass. Okay, translucent materials are like tracing paper, because you can see through, right, but not as clear as glass. And then opaque materials can be like just a metal block. Yeah, okay, so these are just examples. So if you take a look at this over here, number 3, there's based on opacity or transparency of the material of the screen. So again, I'm going to say this. Transparent materials do not allow shadows to form on them. Translucent materials allow faint shadows to form on them. So do not allow faint shadows. Opaque materials allow dark shadows. Okay, so this is when the material itself is the screen. Okay, so if you take a look at this diagram that I've drawn, so basically this is the torch, and over here is the object, is the same object, and for glass there's a no shadow. Okay, and for tracing paper, so this object over here is opaque, and this is a tracing paper. You'll cast a faint shadow over here, and when it's a metal block, okay, metal sheet, okay, you will cast a very dark shadow. Okay, so it depends on the material of the object and the screen as well. Okay, so now let's move on. Okay, for the sixth segment of this video, I'm going to go through light questions using the 3 properties of shadows. Okay, so for question 1, we are going to identify the shape of objects based on the shadow formed. Okay, the setup below shows 3 metal objects placed at different distances from the torch at positions X, Y, and Z. So there's a torch here. So this is objects X, Y, and Z. So 3 metal objects, okay? And then this is the screen. But they have shapes inside of them. So this is the shape that formed on the screen. So there's a large square, a circle, and a small triangle. Okay? So the diagram shows the shadow formed on the screen when the torch was switched on. So this is the shadow. Draw the correct positions of the objects placed at X, Y, and Z. Okay. Remember, for the shadow to become the biggest, you need to put it at the front, right? So we can see that X is the square, and since the circle is the second largest, we can say that Y is the circle and Z is the smallest, which is the triangle. Okay, so this is the answer: square, circle, and triangle. So you must draw it out. Okay, so this is the answer. Now let's move on to the second question. Okay, for the second question, we have interpreting the object's opacity based on the shadow formed. Okay, so let's take a look at it. Okay, so Sarah carried out an experiment in a dark room. She placed sheets P, Q, R, S in a straight line as shown below. Okay, so she placed it in a straight line. Okay, a triangle was cut out from sheet P as shown in the front view. Okay, so a triangle was cut out in sheet P. Okay, when the torch was switched on, 2 observations were made. A dim triangle was seen on sheet Q and a bright triangle was seen on sheet R. So which objects are transparent and translucent? So for P, it is definitely opaque because on Q you could see a faint triangle. So the rest of the part of P should be opaque in order for only a triangle to be seen on Q, right? Okay, so P is opaque, and then Q itself is translucent because it only allows some light to pass through, as a Q couldn't have a dark shadow on it. And then R should be opaque because it allowed a dark and bright triangle to be seen. And S is not possible to tell because we do not have enough information because the shadow ends at R and we do not know about S. Okay, now let's move on to the third question, and I do hope you understand this question. Okay, so the third question, determining the how the length of the shadow changes when an object moves towards or away from a light source. Okay, the cat walked from one end to the other end as shown in the diagram. So this is the diagram. So the cat walked from D to C to B to A. Okay? Arrange the length of the shadows formed at each position of the shortest to the longest. Okay. Remember, when you want a shadow to be very big, right? You need to be as far as possible from the light source. In this case, because in this case, right, for example, for D, right, if I do this, right, because if I use the trick on D, it will cast a very long shadow. So let me just continue this road first, okay? So if I continue this road and then I do this to the cat over here, you actually form this much of a shadow. And then if I continue this road over here until A, and then when I cast the shadow on A, right, sorry, when I cast the shadow on A, you actually give me a smaller shadow because A is actually not as far away from the light source as D. So you need to look at the distance over here, because this light source is actually on top and not going towards the object. So if it's pointing exactly towards the object, right, you have a very small shadow. So in this case, for this cat over here, this part, you have a very small shadow. Okay, and over here also it will be slightly bigger but still quite small. So in this case, right, when it's on top, you need to see where the line is going. Okay, it's just like the sun. When the sun is at one side and you're standing at one side, your shadow will be very long. But when you're directly under the sun, you can only see a small circle below you like this. Okay, imagine this yellow color thing is just your shadow. Okay, so this is how the logic works for the normal thing. But unless you have a torch here laying on the table, okay, and then you have a object here very close to it, you have a very big shadow over here. Okay, you have a very big shadow. Okay, so you have to change your logic to different scenarios. Okay, so in this scenario, I think you should know the answer by now, right? So the answer is C is the shortest, B is the second shortest, A is longer than B, and D is the longest shadow. Okay, so I hope you understand this answer, and I do hope you have understood my explanation for all the questions and light energy today. So thank you and goodbye. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.